Tanya Gaskins. I'm the Assistant Dean for Career and Professional Development here at Catholic University Columbus School of Law. I'm also an alum, so welcome to the alums and also welcome to our students. I am here to introduce first and foremost my friend, Nancy Palermo. Nancy is a 1997 graduate. Nancy, it wasn't that long ago, was it? Feels like just
Seems
yesterday.
like.
I understand. It feels like just yesterday.
Okay.
She's an alum of Catholic University Columbus School of Law as well. She worked as a litigator at a regional Maryland firm for 2 years before she jumped into legal recruiting at Garrison and Sisson, which she's been there for 21 years. Nancy, you started as a toddler, right? It couldn't have been that many years
Yeah,
ago.
I love what I do. That's what it's all about.
That's right. So Garrison and Sisson has been ranked by the American Lawyer Media as the best legal search firm in Washington, D.C. for the last 7 years. And in 2020 was recognized by the Washington Business Journal as the sixth largest search firm by revenue across all recruiting sectors in Washington, D.C. Nancy, who has been there for quite a long time, now serves as the firm's chief operating officer and head of its in-house division. In addition to her in-house practice, she also recruits partners, counsel, and associates on behalf of AmLaw 200 firms and specialty boutiques. Nancy regularly speaks on panels and in presentations, one for me because I'm always drafting her, and then for the Bar Association groups, the Association of the Corporate Counsel, and various other law school audiences as well. She talks about interview techniques, resume drafting, current legal markets and compensation trends, and job search strategies. She is my friend. I'd like to introduce you to Nancy Palermo.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today and my three esteemed panelists who are going to have very insightful comments. We had a great prep call prior to today, so I have no doubt you're going to get a lot of value in hearing how they got to where they are in their careers currently. So I'm going to introduce each one of them, and then we're going to start with Stan, and we'll take things from there. I am going to be monitoring the chat. So we decided it would be helpful if you have questions as they're commenting to please put it in the chat, and I will raise it with each and all of them rather than waiting until the end. Okay, first and foremost, we have Stanley Woodward, a 2008 CUA JD. He's co-founder of Brand Woodward, and also some of you may know him, he's president of our Alumni Council. Next, we have my friend Kiana Taylor. She's a 2003 JD. She is a real estate counsel at Choice Hotels. And then Brandon Coeth, who's a 2013 JD. He is a counsel in the technology group at Lowenstein Sandler. So Stanley, if you can take it away and first walk us through your career evolution since you graduated from Catholic, kind of how you got to where you are, and then I'm going to ask you some follow-up questions.
I'm happy to do that, Nancy, and thanks everybody for being here. First, I have a question for the group, which is, where are y'all? I got dressed up. I put my nicest sweater on. I mean, I know we're all Zoom fatigued. Come on, let's have some fun though. Let's turn those cameras on. So I graduated in 08. I then clerked for twice. I clerked first for the Court of Appeals here in DC. After that clerkship, it was actually right in the middle of our last recession. It was in the legal recession. And Aiken called me and said that they were going to defer me for, I forget how long it was. And so I got a second clerkship at the trial court here in DC at the Superior Court. I then went to Aiken, where I was for 10 years until this past April, when I transitioned into a new position. I started a law firm in the middle of a pandemic, which at the time seemed like a great idea. And I have no regrets whatsoever. I'm having a blast.
So Stan, what precipitated your move from, an AmLaw top 50 firm, the most prestigious, what all of us wish we could work for, to starting your own boutique with your partner from Aiken?
Well, I mean, I think Nancy, you know, as well as anybody, that it's a difficult decision, and it's not one that is reached lightly. The reality is that I had been thinking about making a transition for some time. It spans back well into 2019. In the fall of 2019, I started looking at my options. You know, I think one of the benefits of our legal market is that it's become a lot easier for us to make switches, even sometimes to totally different types of work. And so I was looking at everything from going into the government to going in house to lateraling to another firm, and I really didn't anticipate that I would start my own law firm. That wasn't something that I was considering. Um, and come, you know, beginning of 2020, Stan Brand, who some of you may know, is the former general counsel of the House of Representatives under Tip O'Neill. He ran his own law firm for 30 years before coming to Akin Gump, in theory, to retire. And then in early last year, having run up against a bunch of conflicts at the firm in representing individuals that were being investigated by Congress, he ultimately decided to retire from Akin and start his own law firm again. That happened in mid-February, and he called me knowing that I was looking at my options, and sold me on the following, which is that I would leave Akin. I had a book that I was marketing at other firms. I joined him for 6 months, and we would start out together through the election. And after the election, some of the issues that we were working on, we thought nobody would care about. Regardless of how the election turned out, we thought politics would move on. We were wrong. I was wrong about two things. One, all of the issues we're working on are still very much in the forefront of politics. Turns out that hasn't changed. And two, I thought the pandemic, we would have moved past that, and I was wrong about that too. So here we are.
Stan, can you educate the audience on, the type of practice that you have?
Yeah, sure. And it's evolving, Nancy, every day, as we all are. So at Akin, my practice was very much a hybrid between complex commercial litigation, representing large companies, largely in national scope. So multi-district litigation, or other cases that were across the country. And then also white collar investigations. So whether it be a Foreign Corrupt Practices Act investigation, a congressional investigation, or just a straight criminal investigation, I was doing that. Now I have a lot of freedom to do, frankly, whatever I want. So I'm still doing the commercial litigation. I'm still consulting and working with big firms, including Akin Gump, on that work. I'm actually more heavily involved in the congressional investigation landscape because it's easier for us to represent individuals. We don't have the same fee restrictions that we did at Akin. We can be more flexible in our rates. And then I'm doing, lots of random stuff. I'm working with a family right now to try to help get somebody released from the morgue, or the DC Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. And they're not immediate next of kin. It's the godparents of this person, and they don't know of any relatives, and they're navigating the legal complexities there. So it's been a lot of fun to be sort of a neighborhood lawyer and to be able to work with all manner of types of people. But let's be honest, I'm still very grateful for the large companies that continue to keep me on their cases and pay the mortgage, if you will.
Well, Stan, that's actually a good lead into the next question that I had about your practice. I mean, what are, from a support perspective, either administrative, resources, et cetera, how has your practice had to change going from Akin, where you had tons of people to help you do all sorts of things, versus, I'm assuming it's just the two of you?
Yes, and that has been incredibly challenging. Doing bills has been challenging. Writing my own engagement letters and consulting with the DC Bar to make sure that I'm covering all of my bases there. Working, getting a phone. I have a phone number that's not my cell phone, and getting that set up. Getting, security is front of mind for everybody. So making sure that I have an email account, that I don't have to worry about being hacked, from getting a website. And then some of the stuff that we also, or at least I also took for granted, making copies, getting productions out, having associates who I can delegate work to, that has been challenging. So I've had some experience with contract work and working with firms, vendors that I had worked with before at Aiken, and doing doc reviews and in managing those types of projects. I'm starting to look at contract work from the paralegal landscape. There's a network of folks that do that. And we're busy enough that we're thinking about, we wouldn't bring somebody on full time because that's complicated and I have to get, my accountant says don't do it, but starting to think about more permanent part-time, more permanent 1099 type work, and having a junior person. And I'm finding even in the early stages of that, there's a lot of people that are not following the sort of traditional route of graduating from law school, going to a firm, that they're open to less traditional models of work, which is how I consider myself now too, anyway.
Has your lifestyle or billable hours, has that changed at all in going from the different platforms, or has that been consistent?
Well, I think that depends on who you ask. My wife would say that it has not changed in the slightest and that I work too much. I would say that it's changed dramatically and is not even a comparison. So, I'll be honest with all of you who, now I can see some more of you. I appreciate you. The rest of you, get your cameras turned on. Part of I think the blessings that I couldn't possibly have predicted about my choice of transition time is that I have 3 young boys, 5, 3, and 1. The 2 older boys are in DC public school, which is 100% virtual and Spanish immersion. My wife does so much of that work. She's also effectively an hourly employee. She's a public defender here in DC. But she's done so much of that work, but I've been able to be home literally more and be more involved in helping them to make sure that they're getting the support that they need. So that has been a big difference. I'm home for dinner every night. I'm home to help put them to bed every night. I'm home in the mornings to help them get up. I'm not traveling across the country or even the world to do those sorts of matters. I'm working as much now with Argentina as I was pre-pandemic, but I can do all of that via Zoom instead of flying, 15 plus hours to get down to South America. So that has been a huge change in my experience, and one that I hope it will change. I don't look forward to getting back into the miles clubs of the airlines if I can avoid it.
Awesome. That was all so interesting, Stanley. Thank you. Now we're going to shift gears to Kiana, who's had a very different career path. So Kiana, can you kind of walk us through your evolution since graduating from Catholic?
Yes, I took a law firm job right out of law school as a first-year associate at an AM 200 law firm based out of New York. And I did bond financings. I did affordable housing work with 2 of the partners there. And I really took to the bond financing and the tax work. And so I did that. But unfortunately, the challenge was a lot of first years usually lose their jobs in the first year, and I wasn't immune to that. So 11 of us out of 3 offices of the New York office, the DC office, and the San Francisco office were laid off a year later around Christmas time. So a few months later, I picked up at a regional firm, Turley and Brewer, and I did real estate work, commercial real estate, SBA financing, corporate financing, you name it, I did it, leases, anything that was commercial real estate based. I did the lending work, commercial real estate work for SunTrust Bank, which existed at the time, Capital One Bank, and a few other local banks. And that was really fun, and I really enjoyed that work. But I was working 2,400 hours. I was newly married and wanted to have a family. And I really wasn't getting paid that much either to work those many hours. So I decided to make a transition. And I had interviewed with a lawyer at a firm in Baltimore about 8 months earlier, and they didn't have any positions. It was like a cold call. I was sending out resumes, and he met with me, and he's like, I really like you. If I have anything that comes up, I'm going to call you. I was like, okay, great. So of course you get in your car and say, never going to call me, right? Well, he did call me. And I worked at McKinnon, Shelton & Henn for 8 years after that, doing bond financing, structure finance, public-private partnerships, corporate church. We represented a lot of churches. So I did all that work that came in. I did the lending. I was brought in to help build their lending work in real estate finance practice, which I did. And we did, I brought in M&T Bank, PNC Bank. We did work for Howard Bank and Sandy Spring Bank. And they had a bank that they had worked with that they couldn't, Harbor Bank, which they couldn't get work because they didn't have an associate to do that work. So when I came aboard, I did all that work in addition to doing the bond financings, which was the bread and butter of the firm at that time. And I love that work so much. And I also learned the tax law that, you know, for municipal bonds also. So I spread myself around the entire firm, and I really enjoyed the people that I worked with. But life changes. My husband and I split. I became a single mom, and I had a newborn and a 5-year-old at the time. They're 12 and 7 now. And I needed to make a transition with all the work that I was doing. It was too many hours to make the shift. Nancy knows this because she helped me with this position, but I took a pay cut and got shorter, lower billable hours, which turned out not to be exactly what I expected. I was still working those hours with the cut in pay. And I said, I can't survive, even though, you know, the managing partner there still to this day is a mentor of mine. And we talk periodically all the time. And I know a lot of things that's going on in that firm even today, even not working there because of that relationship. So, and you want to keep building those relationships as you go along in your career. But then I took an in-house position at Choice, and I've been there ever since, 5 years, doing real estate finance. Now I do construction and development for hotels that we bought, we own, and we develop. I've even done some acquisitions of hotel portfolios, corporate work. I manage the company leases, and a host of other administrative things that I never thought I would be doing in-house. Unfortunately, though I do have a better work-life balance, it's still a lot of hours. And so that was a misnomer. I never thought that I would be not at a firm, but working similar hours, but I do have a lot more flexibility, which is great. So, so that's sort of my history, my work history there. Nancy?
Oh, thank you, Kiana. It was a great overview. I had some questions which you answered
Sure.
during all of that. So
Well, I did. Oh, great.
But I still have more. So, you know, since you're the only, you know, the one of the 3 panelists who now has experience and tenure in-house, can you talk to the audience about some of the challenges or differences that you've encountered practicing in-house, maybe some things that you didn't expect that were either a negative or a positive?
Well, at the law firm, it's more of a, you know, it's an episodic work versus being a business partner with the people that you work with in the company. And they view you as a part of the company because you are, and you have one client and it's them. It's every department, you know, that I support, which is the tax department, the real estate, and the asset management department, and the brands department. And so they want you to be available to them, but it's not like the firm where a client calls and they need a specific thing and you deliver that thing and you only focus on the legal aspect of it and some of the business points that, you know, you have to speak to from a legal perspective. Here, I'm Kiana, we want to do this. What do you think? And I can't give them a legal answer. I have to give them the business answer. And so being able to transition from legal speak to business speak was one of my biggest challenges. And so that, being in the firm for 12 years, dealing with those legal issues, that was the biggest challenge. But I did make that transition. And now when I write my emails, I say, okay, that was the legal answer. Now I got to go in here and revise it and understand everything that I just said. And so it makes you think about sort of the business issues that they're with every day. The other challenge is at the law firm, you're the money maker, with the client, and you're on demand, whatever they need. Here, we're a cost center. We cost the company money. And when it's time to make, cuts, you're considered not the money maker. Unfortunate for me, I have transitioned into a money making part of my job. I do handle the legal comfort letters for the lenders of our franchisees. And so that makes money now. So I'm partial cost center, partial billing. So that's great, right? Go pandemic. Our ladies gave me more work. But that's one of the challenges with being in-house is also, the lawyers in-house often say, and I often hear this, that we're not as respected in our company as law firm lawyers are, because they're the ones that have that specific expertise. And I found that to be true. And it's a challenge you can overcome. And I have now, they don't pick up the phone to call the law firm, they call me, because it's not going to cost them $1,000 an hour for me to answer the question the same way they would. So that has taken almost the entire 5 years to get that kind of respect from my colleagues in-house. But it is a challenge that you'll face. I think those are, the billable hours, of course, you think, oh, no billables, I don't have to write this down. And for some time I was writing down the stuff that I did and I was like, what am I doing? But the hours are the same. I mean, you're going to work just as hard in-house as you do, if not harder, because you have that administrative aspect to your job that you have to do. I send the bills out at the firm and we get paid, but I'm responsible for reviewing our outside counsel bills. I'm responsible for managing outside counsel. And if they don't do a good job, who's talking to them? It's me. So I have to spend that time, also on the administrative side. So those are some challenges, some differences in being at the firm versus in-house.
And Kiana, one of the things that we've talked about before is you were hired at Choice for your real estate, in particular your finance experience.
Mm-hmm.
But as you've been there, and then one of the more senior colleagues in the department left, and Kiana's such a strong performer, they said, oh, we don't need to replace that person. We'll just give Kiana that portfolio of work too. So,
yes, how could I forget that?
one of the big distinctions I've always found from practicing in a law firm where you're very narrowly focused, a lot of times, and in your instance, it wasn't because you were necessarily seeking to expand your portfolio. It's just how it happened based on internal changes. So,
and that's happened twice now. My initial title was corporate finance and transactions. That was my title. And so it's transitioned to counsel real estate, but I've also taken on a franchise duty that the franchise department used to have, but that lawyer was also let go and they are not replacing her, and took on a portion of her job, and it was kind of split among other lawyers in the company. But yes, my job has morphed, and you have to be ready for that in-house, because they call it recontracting. So what you were hired to do may not be what you end up doing down the line. But that's the interesting part of it, picking up things you wouldn't have necessarily been able to at the firm.
Another similar question, and then I'm going to turn it over to Brendan. In a law firm context, I think a lot of times, particularly at the associate level, attorneys are much more fungible, right? And they want you to bill hours, and particularly at a junior level, they don't really care about business development, and they may not necessarily care about your, what I call soft skills, right? Your team management, ability, leadership, communications. They just say bill, bill, bill. But in-house, that is extremely important, I've learned over the last 20 years. So What would you say are some of the top soft skills that have enabled you to be a really successful in-house lawyer? And these are things that people need to be thinking about if that's the type of transition they want to make.
I would say communication is number one. Learning how to communicate that business speak is critical because they hire you because of your legal expertise, so they know you have that. It's being able to sit in front of the CEO and the CFO, which I have done, and say, here's why you want to do this deal and here's why you don't. And be not to, oh, there's an easement on the property that's running through the land, you got to get rid. No, don't even, that's not even an issue. That's your issue. It's, well, the pro forma says X, Y, and Z. So I've even had to learn how to read the financial pro formas for the deals that they're doing to understand sort of what the rate of return is on the deal, because that's all they care about. But I don't want to talk about this deal unless the IRR is 10%, or 15%. I'm like, well, what is an IRR? I need to go find that out. So I've taken several finance classes that, to get that understanding. And I've even gone through some internal, take advantage of the internal training that they give on how to, the political savvy and all the Korn Ferry modules they have. I've done that to sort of be able to translate my skills into something that's usable in-house. And I'd say organization is also very critical. Because at the firm, you may have multiple deals running, but you're pretty much doing the similar things. Here, I've had to get an Excel spreadsheet and say, okay, these are the leases. These are when these mature. I got to let people know, use my calendar differently, being able to organize yourself in a way that keeps you on top instead of reactive. You can be proactive in letting, the internal people know what they need to do ahead of time. That's critical.
That's perfect. Thanks. And one of the things you just talked about, Tanya, I'm going to come to you here because this is something you like to discuss, is the idea of skill stacking. And so if you're thinking about making a transition to try to do things to develop additional skills or knowledge base, whether it's through CLEs, getting an LLM, you just talked about, finance classes, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Tanya, do you want to talk about just briefly the importance of that?
Sure. When you are in a location, especially one that has people that are doing something that you're thinking about doing in the future, you want to utilize that as a resource. So, for example, people that are in firms. So Kiana did an amazing job of that when she was at the firm. She said, I spread myself across all of the different areas. What I find is people that are thinking about a transition, they'll start out in the litigation group and say, I really think I want to do tax. Where can I go and do tax? And I'll tell them, you need to start picking up projects from the tax group within your firm and get a really good rhythm with them, transition while you're in the same firm to the tax group, stay there for a year, then you are completely marketable and you're fine and you can transition outside of the firm. But to jump, it's very difficult to transition from one group to the other if you don't have any experience in the other group. You're just too expensive to do that and you're coming in with no skills. So you do need to do your best to try and get some experience if there is a place for you to get that experience within the organization that you're already a part of. If there isn't CLEs, pro bono, there are lots of opportunities, but you've got to sometimes think outside of the box and try and figure out. The other thing is to think about your transferable skills. So while you may not have done work in this particular space, if you are smart about it, you can figure out how to pick the different parts of what you have done that relate to what you're planning to do in the future and play that up and really think about, okay, well, what does a bond trader do or what does a bond lawyer do that is similar to the things that I've done already? Do they have similar clients? Do they have similar views about how you look at documents? Are they looking for the same type of things within documents? And to be able to highlight those things, because if you don't highlight them, the person that you're interviewing with will not think about that. They're just thinking the title and not necessarily the skill sets. If you present them with the skills that are similar, then they will buy into it all the time.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of those great comments with the tax associate or the litigation associate who wants to do tax profile, I always tell candidates, really, if you want to make a dramatic shift like that, ideally, you really need to do it in the first 3, maybe 4 years of your practice. It needs to be early on. And so in addition to stuff that Tanya suggested in that instance, go to school at night. I know who wants to go back to school, but go to school at night. Georgetown's got a phenomenal tax LLM program. Or go to the federal government and use your litigation skills to get into the tax division there. That's another great way to transition. So there are, and the government is a huge, in my opinion, way to do that. You could be doing one area of regulatory law. Let's say it's telecom. You decide after 2 years, oh God, I hate this. I was on the Health Law Journal in law school. I think that would be an area that I'd be interested in. So apply to HHS and market your regulatory counseling and compliance skills in that environment, and that will help you shift as well.
One other thing that I wanted to include, especially right now as the market is starting to tighten because of COVID, yet another COVID wrinkle. What I've found is that some people are not able to find jobs in the area that they dreamed about. And this happened the last time. So this happened in 2008, the same thing. People were not able to find their dream jobs. And one of our alums presented kind of a really great model for how to do things. This individual was really interested in a compliance space and couldn't find opportunities within that space, and actually started writing a blog, doing articles, started having speaking engagements, and started to be known as the person who was an expert in that particular area, and then was able to find the type of job that they wanted. And so even with some of the alums that we have right now, recent grads who are interested in moving into a particular space, I'm like, write an article. Right now, especially if you can think about how your particular area of practice relates to COVID or how it's being impacted by COVID, and almost everything is being impacted by COVID, you can find a place to publish it.
All great points. Now, last but definitely not least, Brendan, you're up. So if you could quickly walk our audience through your career path, and then I'll follow up with my questions.
Sure. So I was in the evening division at Catholic, and towards the end of my time there, I quit my day job so that I could take some, more legal-minded internships and other opportunities. And I was at an event just like this that Professor Lipton ran for the securities program, met an alum. This is back in the beginning of 2012. So a lot of the law firms had not fully picked up their summer programs post-recession. And a lot of places just didn't have summer programs in 2012 still. And I met this alum. We got, to talking after the event and didn't hear anything for like 3 weeks, and then took a job at FINRA, actually. And it was about a week before I was supposed to start at FINRA. He calls me and says, listen, we have one of our clients. They're trying to go public this summer. We really need some help. We don't really have a summer program. Do you want to take it? Called Professor Lipton. I said, listen, I was supposed to start at FINRA on Monday. What am I supposed to do? He's like, you're a fool if you don't take this. Don't worry. I'll call FINRA. You got to do this. So I took the job. It was so for like a fake summer program at a firm called Dow Lonis in DC. And I worked there through the summer program in the general corporate group. I was supposed to be helping with this client with an IPO. And then that summer, everyone ran away from .com IPOs. Facebook's stock tanked famously that summer. Nobody wanted to do .com IPOs. And they said, guess what? Now you're an M&A associate. You're no longer doing cap markets. So I stayed there through the end of the summer. And because I was an evening student, they let me stay through the rest of my time at Catholic. So I worked there during the day, went to Catholic at night, graduated early that winter, took the bar, and then 3 days after the February bar, I started as an associate. 2 months later, we lost our largest client, 30% of the billables disappeared, and they put the firm up for sale. And that was such a crazy experience. 3 months into your first big law job, Dale Lonis was an Am Law 200 firm. And, we're being told we're going to be shopped around. I'm from New York. I currently live in New York and work in New York. My wife and I wanted to return. We found out through the grapevine who the 4 firms that were bidding on us were, and they all had offices in New York. So I took advice from some wise people, and they said, lay low, do your job. People always want first year corporate associates. You're rather fungible, as we were describing before. And I did just that. And I watched our firm go from 150 people when I started to 54 attorneys when we went over to Cooley. We merged with Cooley later that year. So that year was wild. If anybody wants to talk about that another day, I'd love to. Went over to Cooley. That was another little shift. So by then I had been doing M&A for a year and a half, getting a lot of repetitions. Dale Lonis focused on media companies. There was a lot of consolidation in the market. So I got a lot of great deals, but Cooley worked with tech startups. And overnight, again, I had to, shift and transition and learn how startups worked and everything like that. But I was still doing M&A. So, same types of skills, but for different clients. It was very interesting to piggyback off of what Kiana was saying. The firms like Cooley, Lowenstein, where I am now, a handful of them that work with startups, we are more generalists than some of the other big laws because our clients are just messy. They might have 1 or 2 co-founders, and that's the entire client. So we have to be their accountant, their lawyer, their psychiatrist all together. And then I was there for about a year and a half in the DC office, and my wife and I said, we really needed to move back to New York to start a family. And when we had our pre-call, people said I should mention this. Cooley was being very difficult about my move to New York. So I started interviewing. I went out and I got an offer from another place in New York, and I gave my 2 weeks notice. I said, you were being difficult about me moving to New York. I'm leaving. Within 36 hours, my transfer to New York was approved, and I stayed with Cooley for another 5 years after that. So I moved up to the New York office with Cooley, stayed there, and things were beginning to change. In my last year there, the firm was growing rapidly. It had doubled in size basically from when I started there in 2013 to when I left in 2020. Because of that, the focus was really just on size, and not just size, being number 1, moving up to number 1 in rankings in M&A, moving up to number 1s in revenue, and it was just getting tiring, and that's not what I was there to do, right? So I knew I wanted to change for that reason, and I started looking. And in 2020, a whole bunch of people that I used to work with left, and they started going places. And I decided that was a good time for me to make my move. And I followed a partner that I worked with a lot over to Lowenstein, and now I'm doing the same kind of work, but at a much smaller place. And I love it. I know there's some questions you had for me that's built into here, so I'll save them for the questions.
Sure. And folks, if you're not familiar with Lowenstein, it's a great firm. It's an Am Law 200 firm. And so I guess one of the initial questions, Brendan, and I asked Stan about this, and Kiana even, what have been the differences that you've seen because you're still working for the same partner, right? How has your practice changed, if at all, from a substantive perspective? I'm guessing maybe your billing rates are lower, so you're able to grow at a faster clip in that regard. and also administrative support. How is that different at an AmLaw, top 50 firm versus an AmLaw 200 firm?
Right. Luckily, and this is what I was looking for, which is why I didn't go in-house or somewhere else. A lot of the resources I've experienced have been the same. And I don't know if that's regional. I think a lot of the firms in the 100 to 200 bucket of the AmLaw 200 find a hard time competing with the AmLaw 100s in the New York market. So, the resources are the same, the pay's the same, those kind of things. But you're right that my billable rate did go down, which has relieved stress, frankly. Part of being at a AmLaw top 50 was, you had these clients that were constantly complaining about the bill. You had to run things a lot more leanly and tightly. And, when you come over here and the billing rate is lower, some of that stress goes away. So, high level, all the reasons I was leaving the old place is what's great about the new place. I feel lighter, right? Because there is not that constant gunning for number one. We're perfectly happy sitting at 112 or wherever we are, and the difference between 112 and 107 isn't that huge. So when we have group meetings, practice group meetings, we're not obsessing about that discussion, right? How do we get to number one? The discussion is more substantive. We can actually focus on the substantive work in our group meetings, which has been great and enjoyable.
How about from a billable hour perspective? I think people are always curious if you have a much improved lifestyle at an AmLaw 200 firm.
Yeah, I would say it's hard for me to gauge at the moment because I've only been there since October, and 2020 was a hyperactive year for the whole corporate world. There was a lot of deal activity. December was my highest billing month in my entire career.
Wow.
But frankly, with the positives about COVID that Stanley was talking about, I was doing it from home. I was still hanging out with my son. I was, saving the time from commuting and traveling. It didn't feel as stressful, that very high hour month compared to some of my other high hour months pre-COVID. But I will say that, some firms, and it doesn't matter if it's AmLaw 10, 50, 100, 200, you just have to do the research if you're looking for this move. Give credit to different types of hours as billable hours. And Cooley was getting a lot of disgruntled associates because they only gave billable credit for actual billable hours, generally. Lowenstein gives billable credit for all pro bono hours, and they do a lot of focus on pro bono. They give credit hours for marketing and participating in pitches and things like that. And that could be a frustration when you're a mid to senior level associate trying to build a book of business. You're not going to get any credit in a financial sense, at least. You might get some soft credit, but you're not going to get any credit towards your bonus, for example, for spending all those hours on pitches and all those hours marketing. So that definitely helps, that all that time counts.
And following up on your point about when you moved, Brendan, you've only been there for going on 5 months now. Of the 3 panelists, you're the only one that really did a full-blown search starting in January, let's say, because I think we talked about this
right
pre-call. So you made that transition and were interviewing throughout the pandemic, whereas Stanley was much better, or he was situated, at the beginning of that. So talk to us about how your search evolved during the pandemic and any kind of suggestions or recommendations you can give to our audience on that.
Sure. So the evolution of the search, really quickly, I started looking right at the beginning of the pandemic, and that's when everyone thought it was going to be short, right? And so when everyone went on lockdown, that second week of March, There was a little bit of a lull in deal work. A bunch of people were like, oh, let's, go pencils down. We'll see where we are in 2 weeks. And so I used that time to start making the calls to recruiters and other people in my network who had been reaching out. And I said, listen, I'm thinking of making a move, blah, blah, blah. And, they had some leads or whatnot. And then when it looked like COVID was going to last for a long time, they said, you know what, everyone's putting the brakes on recruiting. Come back to us in a little bit. Work started picking up. I got, I was focusing on the work, doing things at home, those kind of stuff. And I just let it go to the back burner. Then in the summer, when people realized COVID was here to stay, I guess, and firms started hiring again, as I mentioned, a bunch of my colleagues left. Partners that I got a lot of work from, they left. Some of my favorite associates who worked for me were leaving. And I was saying, this is the time. So then I did start reaching back out to the recruiters, but I focused more on my network at that time. I was making calls to all those people who had left. I was making calls to people who I knew had left a year or two ago to see, if those places were hiring. And that's really where I got all the leads from. It was people who I had worked with at Cooley who had left in the prior 2 or 3 years. And that's where all the positive hits came from. So I focused on that.
I couldn't agree with you more on that observation. In the fall of 19, I spent a lot of time on LinkedIn and on Indeed and doing that work. The first, Nancy, you'll love this story. The first job I applied for was at Google. It was a super amazing job. I got an interview, right? Which Nancy will tell you that never happens, right? Blank application. I go to Google. I'm thinking I'm set for life. Like, I'm never going to work at another place again. I'm so happy. I didn't get the job. And so I'm like, well, I guess this is going to be easy. I'll just send out a few more applications on Indeed. Crickets, right? I don't hear anything for months. And so a plug to you, Nancy, like, I then started working with Aiken, happens to have an in-house recruiter, which I think bigger firms are doing now. But I think that you cannot overemphasize the importance of connections, yours and others, and folks like Nancy who are just hitting the pavement day in and day out. Hey, what are you guys up to? Are you looking? What are you looking for? And getting, having their finger on the pulse of where is there going to be a good fit. And I suspect, Nancy, that you'll agree that you often reach out to people who don't know that they're looking, but you just have such a great Rolodex of contacts and friends, and are able to make that connection. It's the process that you described is very much more where I was having a lot more success in February, March, when things blew up.
I just saw one of the questions, and I want to loop that in with a specific experience I had. Because a lot of partners had left in 2020 from Cooley, particularly in my practice group, the partners did have non-competes and non-solicit. I'm sorry, not non-competes, non-solicits. The partners had non-solicits. The associates didn't. And so the partners were having a hard time poaching their associates after they had left. And some in particular got a lot of cease and desist orders from the firm to, stop poaching associates. I was saved from that because I had done a blanket reach out to recruiters at the beginning of my search and had resumes at a ton of top firms. And I know that a lot of your friends will say, oh, don't do that because, I get a small little bonus for, bringing someone in. Honestly, it wasn't worth the hassle. It was really nice that I had that trail so that when I did end up following this partner and my former employer got wind of it, I could straight in the face say, no, I had been talking to them for a few months. I had put an application in a while ago. No, I was not poached, kind of a thing. So that's a very specific little technical piece of advice, but I wanted to throw that out there.
One thing I want to follow up on, and I don't remember if it was Stanley, you or Brennan that said it, talking about updating like your social media information. I was on the phone today with a tax associate at, well-regarded firm in DC who's looking to make a move. And we were talking about his practice. And I said, well, you know, your website bio says X, but I see on your resume, you do Y and Z. He's like, oh yeah, you know, the firm wrote my website bio when I joined them 5.5 years ago. I guess I should update that. And I'm like, yeah, you really should, because you're trying to do X, not Y and Z. And if a potential employer goes to your website profile, they're going to be completely confused. He was like, oh, yeah, great point, great point. So it's very important to do that.
Yeah, and I'll add, I was one of those people that, coolly wrote my bio 5 years ago, and it did not reflect what I was doing at all. I actually did an event like this for the business school, because I'm a double alum from Catholic, maybe a year and a half ago, and they just pulled my bio off the website. And I was like, that is not at all what I do, actually. It's wrong. But what I felt towards the time that I was looking is, it had gone so long that if I then asked marketing group to update my bio, it would look a little suspicious.
Right.
So to pair or to jump onto your comment is, it's a very good habit to just be regularly doing that. And then you do not raise any suspicions when you are looking to leave.
Yeah.
And to be honest, as long as you can, there's usually a reason. Like, I'm thinking about writing an article, or I'm thinking about being on a panel. I really want to make sure that my bio accurately reflects. While there are some marketing people that may give you a side eye and wonder if there's something else, as long as you have a reasonable explanation, then they usually are like, okay, and you write it up and you send it to them. They usually don't care.
Kate, I see we're approaching 6 o'clock, so we just have a few more minutes. We've got one other question I want to ask the panel, but can you put the slide that I
Yes.
with? Can you share that with everybody?
Yes. Hold on.
What she's going to share.
Sorry.
Oh,
There we go.
Take a screenshot.
I'm so sorry.
This is something I came up with for this presentation. For those of you who are actively looking to find a new position this year, based on 21 years of looking at jobs, not only in terms of what I recruit for, but every day I get these emails from various services that I subscribe to. So these are some really good resources for you to write down. And if any of you want, I'm sure Kate can forward it to you after the presentation, but just wanted you to be aware of those. And then the question to the panel is, any comments you have about when you land your dream job and then end up leaving for a new job you never saw yourself doing, and doesn't necessarily have that shiny attraction, see also Google, you once had for your dream job. Basically, it's, doing a massive shift in your career. I'm not sure that any of you guys have really done that, but I don't know. Well, Tanya, you can speak to that. You used to be a practicing litigator, and look at what you're doing now, and me as well. How did you do what you did?
So I decided to leave based on what was going on in my personal life, and with my son and his health. I think you always have to figure out how you can explain it in a way to people that makes sense. So whenever you're thinking about a transition, people are fine as long as it makes sense to them. If you're transitioning to a new job and you're like, this is the reason, sometimes it requires you to do what we tell you not to do in recruiting, which is go into your personal life. But in some ways that eliminates the question marks. So as soon as someone asks me, well, why did you leave practice? And I can say, well, in my last year of practice, my son was diagnosed with a serious medical condition, and me leaving was necessary. I needed to be able to manage his disease and make sure that he was going to still be the person I wanted him to be able to be in terms of being an athlete. There are no other questions about that. That completely makes sense to people. They automatically get it. Family is important, making sure that your child is able to do what they need to do and manage. And then the next question is always, how is he? And it's no more about, well, did you really leave for this reason? So as long as it makes sense to people and you have a really good explanation, even if it's not something personal, even if your explanation really is, I'm trying to transition from a litigation practice to a practice that was a little bit more transactional. I started to do transactional work. I really enjoyed it. I wanted to transition. So you just need to really sit down and think, honestly, why was this move necessary for me as a person? And be able to explain it in a way that people can understand.
Excellent. So I think that's a great close to this. I don't see any other questions in the chat, but
A hard time believing that there's 40 people on this call. You know, between
I
the
have
four of
one-
us, we're talking like what, $3,000-$4,000 an hour, and you all joined this call and you don't have any questions.
I will say one thing to close, unless there's any more questions. I really feel that there's no such thing as a dream job. I think it's the better job. You know, as Tanya was saying, a life change happened and she needed a situation, a work situation that was amenable to that. And that's the same thing that happened to me. You know, nobody thinks they're going to get divorced and be a single mom of 2 kids and well, what do I do now with my life? So I think it's the life situations that will carry you to the better situation. But being in, you know, graduating in 2003, looking back, I can't say that any job that I've had was a dream, because they all have a certain challenge to them. Yes, I'm doing the work I like to do, but there's other things that I could do that I would like also. So I just wanted to say that.
And Kiana, you're exactly right. There's so many wrinkles. I mean, I will say that probably my dream job, other than this one, of course, was when I was actually practicing and I was working at Howry. And Brendan, you and I share that experience. Howry dissolved all around me. It was originally supposed to be a merger, and then the whole firm dissolved all around me. And you've just got to really understand that regardless of where you're working, that life is going to continue to happen to you, that you're going to have to be resilient. And I hate the word grit. I like resilient much better. You just have to figure out how to pivot. Life is going to throw lots of things at you. Don't feel like you're taking a step down or in the wrong direction. Sometimes you have to pivot, and a place that you didn't see yourself going, that's where you are, and it's where you need to be at that moment.
yeah, the last thing that I'll say to really close it out is similar to Tanya. So I graduated from Catholic. I had clerked at this law firm in Rockville all through law school. I thought I wanted to be a litigator. I was there for 2 years, and I woke up one day and I said, "Oh my God, I hate my job. I hate my life. This is so atrocious. What have I done?" And oh, I have $100,000 in debt. So I sent my resume to my current firm asking for help in finding a new position. And they brought me in and they interviewed me and they said, "Well, Jeannie, you have this whole background for 4 years between undergrad and law school. I worked in Manhattan and I did sales and marketing in the fragrance industry." And they were like, "Have you ever thought about like merging, your knowledge of the law with your sales and marketing background and being a legal recruiter?" And I was like, no, like my parents will kill me. But here I sit 21 years later. They convinced me to do it. And I am one of those people that wakes up every morning and I love what I do. So Kiana, I get it. Like most people would say they're not in their dream job. But for me, I sort of feel like I am. And why I share this story, because I think there are a number of Catholic grads that have taken their law degree and done something different, like me or Tanya, and just a ton of people. And we've got such a great alumni network, as Stanley can attest to. So, if you're thinking about doing something different, talk to the Career Services Office about alumni who are in, different areas beyond the practice of law that you think might interest you as well, and have an informational interview and learn what it's all about. There's so many different things you can do with your law degree.
So I wanted to answer Amy's question. I talk to alums about this all the time. Once you've left the legal field, how can you re-enter? It really depends. So my advice depends on how long you were actually practicing, and how you were practicing before you decided to leave. The easiest transition point back in is if you still have contacts at your former employer or former contacts with that employer, whether it's clients that had relationships with them. That's probably the easiest transition point back in. If you don't, and everyone's not warm and fuzzy with the people once they leave, especially law firms, it's like a betrayal. You leave, some firms are like you've betrayed them for the rest of your life. If you are interested in trying to transition back, and let's say your practice area is litigation related, I tell people all the time, a really good pivot point to transition back after many years away from practice, sometimes you can do a clerkship. It's a great pivot point. It doesn't pay great, but it can be a pivot point for people who have been away to be able to show that they are good legal writers, that you get good contacts. In addition, there's always ways to talk about your transferable skills and the things that you've done while you've been away. And then just start doing some of the cold submissions. We have a list in our office of small to mid-sized firms that we've had relationships with. You want to start reaching out to alums, start putting your information in front of them, really work your contacts, and alums are amazing and will help you.
Okay, I think that's it. Stanley, the cutest son. Take yourself off mute. He's so cute.
Hi.
Just learned to walk this week. He just started
wants-
walking this week.
He wants to talk.
He's adorable. All
So
right,
I-
everybody. Well, I think that everybody put in here our contact information. So feel free to reach out to Kate, anybody. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Hi,
everybody.
Thank you
Everyone.
very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Hello?
Hi, I had one question that I put in the chat that didn't get addressed. I wanted to know if you have any tips on how to transition from a legal career into something with like strategic partnerships and external affairs.
So do you want me to answer or someone else wants to take it?
Go ahead.
They're like, you take it, Tanya. So again, it really, you're more than welcome to call me. I don't want to, because it really will depend on your personal situation and what you've been doing in terms of your practice and exactly what you're thinking about in terms of external affairs, because that's kind of broad. So I'd love to be able to talk to you. You can always reach me. I'm happy to look at your materials. I'm happy to have a kind of a one-on-one conversation about what your plans are and what you have in mind, and we can then game plan.
Okay, thank you.
All right, well, thank you so much, panelists, speakers, hosts. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I think that's all the questions, Nancy. Nancy, go off.
Yeah.
And
Sheila,
thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone,
Thank
for
you.
joining us.
It's
Thanks
so
for
good to
organizing,
see
Kate.
you,
Your
Tanya.
time. It's so
Thank
good
you.
to see you too.
Kate.
I sent you an email. So Kiana and I graduated at the same time, so we know each
Yes.
other.
Oh,
Nice.
2003. And Shawnee, didn't Shawnee? Is
Yep.
2000?
Shawnee as well.
Shawnee also, yes.
Shawnee
Yep.
was on here earlier. She had to
I
jump
was
off.
hoping, I didn't see her face. I was hoping to say hi.
Yeah, I'll send her an email. We all have to get together.
I agree.
We'll do a virtual
A
happy hour.
Virtual-
Yeah,
We need
and now
wine.
we'll get Sharita in there too.
Yeah. We haven't gotten together in a long time. I sent you an email. Let's try and figure out a time.
Okay, we'll do.
All right.
All right,
See ya.
I'm
Bye-bye.
gonna
Thanks,
end the
everybody.
meeting.
Good to see
Thank
you.
you all.
Thank you.